Hello there, and welcome back to Mike's Mets podcast with your host, Mike. So, we're going to discuss today some of the Mets offseason moves, and I'm going to specifically grade them based on how I think the moves are going to pay out for the Mets in the 2023 season coming up. So, we have a few moves to go over. I'm first going to start off with the same thing I've been talking about the previous two podcasts, which is about Carlos Correa and his deal. So this was arguably the biggest move of the offseason thus far, with Carlos Correa agreeing to a 12-year, $350 million deal. In principle, there is concern over his physical. They do have the agreement with the Mets. It's just a matter of actually finalizing the contract agreement. Upon doing so, Correa will be playing third base for the Mets. This should form an incredibly potent left-hand side of the field with Francisco Lindor, which everybody's excited for. This move comes with, obviously, the marker of we don't know exactly what Correa's status is, and we're probably not going to know for some period of time still to come. My prediction already was completely off by how long the negotiations were going to continue with Correa and his agent Scott Boras and the New York Mets front office. So we're still ongoing. We're still trying to figure out when exactly that signing is going to actually be finalized and what exactly the specific language of it is going to be, if there are going to be any changes to maybe the amount of years or the amount of money that he's going to be guaranteed. We still have to see. Upon its likely finalization, we can assume that this is, again, probably the biggest deal of the offseason. I can't imagine anything really coming close. Even the signings of Jacob deGrom, the Mets signing of Justin Verlander, which we'll go into, really nothing coming anywhere close to anything from any team. This was an enormous signing for the Mets. So it has to be graded with a grade of A+, in my opinion. It's a slam dunk. Correa, one of the best players in baseball last season. His season was not like jump off the wall performance. Let's say that. And that's probably what some detractors have said about Correa was well, where's the season that he's been coming to, or has been playing to? When's he going to emerge into an MVP candidate? When's that going to happen? Just to be clear, in 2021, he did finish fifth in MVP voting. He won a Gold Glove, was an All-Star, finished the season with a 7.2 WAR. In 2022, obviously his contract year, his first year with Minnesota, finished with a 5.4 WAR for his performance during the season. He batted .291 with 22 home runs, 64 RBIs. Again, doing this with a Twins team that was not a offensive powerhouse, certainly a lot less than what he would be dealing with the Mets. So you have to assume that he was not playing with a full deck in terms of a supporting cast, that his addition to the Mets lineup would obviously give him a lot more RBI opportunities, a few more chances with guys behind him who are imposing hitters in their own right. So his introduction to the Mets lineup would obviously improve those numbers. And if he is healthy, which I assume he would be, you're going to see a terrific season in the middle of that Mets lineup. So that's really the only way I can grade that addition as an A+. It's a slam dunk. It really fortifies the third base position for the Mets going forward. We've never really seen that much of Correa at third base. He's such a fantastic infielder, arguably maybe one of the best infielders in baseball over the last few years. His addition alongside Francisco Lindor will really put them in a great state going forward. Them being the Mets, so we can assume that's going to be the biggest signing of the offseason, and that's an A+. I think the only A+ I graded for the offseason. But let's move on from Carlos Correa, and let's go through some of the. Now that we got Correa out of the way, let's talk about some of the other moves that they made, specifically the non-signings. Starting with the Mets trading for the Tampa Bay Rays left-handed reliever Brooks Raley. Raley, who was enjoying probably the best season of his career last year with the Rays. admittedly not a very long career. Even though he's 34, he's been kind of bounced around during his time in the major leagues. We've seen him with the Chicago Cubs, briefly with the Cincinnati Reds, and then with the Houston Astros, and then 2021 started to kind of put together with the Astros, even though the ERA was unsightly 4.78. You could tell that he was kind of marching towards this kind of stretch where his strikeout rate was impressively high. He had a really good walk rate, even though he had the 4.78 ERA. Had a 3.27 FIP, which kind of shows that this guy was getting guys out on his own and making it clear that he was an improving quality left-handed reliever. And then last year really put together a fantastic season across the board. He finished with a 2.68 ERA, 61 strikeouts in 53 and two-thirds innings, only 15 walks allowed. This good for a 10.2 strikeout per 9 innings ratio, 2.5 walks per 9 innings ratio. And then you have an FIP that was 2.74, so he was cooking for the entire season based on those numbers. His addition gives the Mets basically what they needed all of last year, which was a really good left-handed reliever. And you have to recall, the Mets throughout the entire 2022 season were dealing with one of the worst groups of left-handed relievers in the league. I mean, it was ugly. It was some of the worst pitchers in the game stepping up for them. And his addition is an enormous positive addition to them. He was going to make that bullpen so much stronger just by the quality of him being a guy you can slot him in anywhere in from the 7th to 9th inning if need be. So he's going to be a excellent addition to that team, I have no doubt. So his addition coming really at the proper point. He will make $4.5 million next season. He remains under team control through the 2025 season. So this is a guy who's going to be you can comfortably slot into that bullpen for the next few years. That's going to be great at a B+. It was a terrific addition, a great trade by the Mets to acquire Raley. Nothing really can be said negatively about it, other than like he hasn't really had a particularly long period of success. It's really just kind of the last 2 years. And we'll see if he can pick that up, especially because he's going to be moving to a much bigger market. But I feel like he's just a proper addition, and he's going to make this team significantly better. Moving on to the Rule 5 draft, the Mets had selected right-handed reliever Zach Green, and then they acquired him from the crosstown New York Yankees. So Green, if you look at his stats in the minor leagues last year, pitched a heck of a year, and this is why he's going to be an intriguing addition to the team, just on the strength of his strikeout rate, which was a spectacular 12.6 and 96 strikeouts in 68 and a third innings. Finished the year 9-0 in the bullpen. A few starts made, four starts made. Finished 13 games. And you look at the stat, I mean, like, he really killed it. Now, the walk rate, not great, something he needs to work on. His age is also not something that you're going to see really exciting a lot of people. He is 26 years old, going into the next season. But if selecting the Rule 5 draft, it means that he will be part of the 40-man roster. So he's going to be slotted in there. I assume he probably has a chance to make the team out of spring training, and very well could be, based on the still not quite great group of middle relievers that the team has in place right now. So there's a good chance that Green may make the team and start opening day with the Mets. If not, he will continue in AAA, I presume. But his addition is intriguing. I like him as a reliever. Relievers are something that they need, and Raley's numbers in the minor leagues have been certainly eye-popping. He has truly terrific stuff in terms of great whiff ability. 211 career strikeouts in the minor leagues, so definitely nothing to sneeze at. And he looks like somebody who could be a force for this team going into 2023. Just remains to be seen if he will be part of the team and when exactly he will be joining the team. But I could see it happening, him making a team right at spring training. The other additions that they made were acquiring in a trade from the Marlins, Alicia Hernandez and Jeff Brigham. And these were not great additions. Brigham has shown flickers of talent. Certainly last year he had what looked like a good year. I mean, in terms of limited appearances, only 16 made all of last year. But he made the most of it. It looked like good numbers from my perspective. A great strikeout rate, 10.5 per 9 innings. Finished with a 3.38 ERA, 3.65 FIP. So was certainly throwing and getting guys out for the most part. And again, it's just a small sample size, and really over a full year, you have to wonder how his addition is going to be. But low risk move for the Mets to acquire him, and then along with him, Alicia Hernandez. Am I saying that right? Alicia Hernandez. I'm right. So Alicia Hernandez, not so good last year. 6.35 ERA, and was not really looking like a quality reliever. The Miami bullpen, just a couple of years removed from what looked like it was going to be like this out of nowhere star-making turn, but he has seen his strikeout rate drop dramatically from his 2020 performance, where he was striking out guys at an 11.9 strikeout per 9 inning ratio. These are terrific numbers in 2020, and it's just he's very quickly dropped down the Miami Marlins bullpen hierarchy, and now is in a position where he's still young, which is certainly in his favor. He is only 27 years old. He will be turning 28 in May, so there's still a chance for him to kind of refocus himself, but the numbers were not good last year, so it will be interesting to see if he does make the team. Will he be a call up at some point? If he does not, if he starts the year in AAA, remains to be seen. But his addition doesn't really jump off the page, so we'll see exactly where that's going to end up. I don't believe I graded the Green edition, so I'm going to grade that as a B-. And then for Hernandez and Brigham, I'm going to give Brigham a C+, just because we haven't seen a ton of Brigham during his major league career, so for me to really give him a really positive rating. I think there is a chance for him to be something. And then Alicia Hernandez, that's going to be a C-, just because he is still young. There's a chance for him to turn it around, so it was a low-risk addition. But Hernandez, not somebody I see as a particularly impressive addition. We may see differently from him, but let's just move on from there. And we'll go into our first signing of the offseason I want to go into. So we went over Correa, but I want to go into this one, which was Danny Mendick. And Danny Mendick signed on a 1-year, $1 million deal. And Mendick had played last year with the Chicago White Sox and played every year with the Chicago White Sox thus far. So he was drafted by the White Sox and had just been kind of this rotating piece out of the White Sox bench the last few years, kind of factoring as a super utility man, utility infielder, really. So you see him slotted in at second base, shortstop, third base. If this sounds familiar, it might sound like this guy compares a lot to Luis Guillorme, just in terms of his abilities. Not the defender that Guillorme is, in my opinion, but comes with him a little bit more of a offensive profile. So Guillorme has just kind of been, you're kind of waiting for Guillorme to kind of string it together, so you could be a little bit more of an imposing force in the lineup whenever he was playing. But it just never really worked out for him. Mendick comes with a little bit more of a frightening profile. Last year, anyway, batted .289, finished with a 786 OPS. It's a 121 OPS plus. 3 home runs, 15 RBIs. Good numbers across the board. Just again a small sample size. Unfortunately, we only played in 31 games, but flashed a bit of a bat, and this is a solid addition to the team. You have to wonder where exactly he's going to slot in because again, with Luis Guillorme, unless they're planning some kind of move with Guillorme, these guys seem to be in the same general Venn diagram in terms of their abilities. Just that Guillorme comes with, I think, a much better glove. So the Mendick signing, I'm going to give a B minus. I don't particularly understand his addition. Again, unless there is some larger move that the Mets are trying to play at some point, which I'm not seeing. But Mendick, if he does make the team next year, could be a solid bench addition. And I'm going to assume this is really more of a depth signing than anything, than them expecting him to play any kind of dividends across the year. So I'll give it a B minus. You really can't go wrong with a utility infielder, especially a guy who can swing the bat. But his overall contributions are going to be kind of dictated by the amount of playing time he gets. And I don't really see him making the team out of spring training, but it remains to be seen where exactly he's going to end up. So those are going to do it with the smaller moves. And I want to move on to the big moves now. And from here on, it's the big moves here on out. And I want to do these in order of how I graded them in terms of their overall contribution. So I'm going to grade these from lowest grades to highest grades for the remaining of their offseason additions. So first, we have Omar Narvaez, who signed a 2-year, $15 million deal for with the team after what was something of a slow-going career, but certainly better than anything that the Mets catchers were putting up last year, which was probably the ugliest we've seen from the Mets catching positions from some time. James McCann and Tomas Nido were not getting it done. Let's say that, and they needed somebody who could slot in with a slightly better offensive profile. Now, that being said, Narvaez had a terrible 2022 season, something that was, in comparison to McCann and Nido, not good. Let's say he was not coming off a great year. Signs for what was comparatively generous, 2 years, $15 million. So we'll see how that's going to slot in. I will say Narvaez comes with him a much better career OPS. He has a 728 career OPS over his time with the Chicago White Sox, Mariners, Seattle Mariners, and the Milwaukee Brewers. And with the Milwaukee Brewers, actually was an all-star in 2021. Hit 11 home runs, 49 RBIs, batted 266. Again, this is 2021, 2022. Finished batting 206, 597 OPS. Only 4 home runs, only 23 RBIs. But again, this was over a small sample size. Only played 84 games last year. So he was not playing at a particularly good rate. His offensive abilities, I think, do outweigh any kind of problems that he might have. In Seattle in 2019, admittedly 2019 was a year that everybody was hitting home runs, but he hit 22 home runs that year. Batted 278, 813 OPS, and people were kind of raising their eyebrows at that. It was a sort of out of nowhere performance that he didn't really translate going forward from that point on, although he did make an all-star team 2 years later. But what the Mets are really kind of hoping for here is a placeholder, a guy who can comfortably slot in, and you can feel satisfied with him playing both sides of the plate. An underrated defensive catcher, I think. I don't think he's ever going to win a Gold Glove, but a guy who really knows what he's doing back there. And this is kind of where you're saying, okay, well, no need for James McCann, who they did trade away to the Baltimore Orioles, although they did eat a large piece of his salary. And then you have Tomas Nido, and Nido's contributions really come from behind the plate, not really in the batter's box. And of course, you have the looming specter of Francisco Alvarez, and Francisco Alvarez is going to make the team at some point. It's just a matter of when exactly, but he will be in there, barring any kind of catastrophe where he gets hurt or something like that. Knock on wood, that doesn't happen, but the expectation is that Alvarez is going to be taking the majority of the games back there behind the plate, but Narvaez is sort of the uh, fallback plan just in case anything goes wrong with their move for Alvarez to eventually assume the primary catching duties for this team. So Narvaez is a solid. I think really you can't. It's not a bad addition. I just don't think it's anything particularly noteworthy. And then you're really paying 2 years, $50 million for a guy who's at most going to be a backup, I mean, with the Mets' plans. So it's a lot to pay for him, but catchers are a premium position, particularly guys who can play, do both sides, both two-way players. So we'll see how that works out for them, but I can't go wrong with that. I grade it a B minus. Really nothing I can really say about that. It's a good left-handed hitter, adept behind the plate. It's just really about keep him in place for eventually Alvarez. So you should really just kind of keeping that catching glove warm for Alvarez while they're waiting for him to come up. And let's move on to our next move. And our next move I graded was the twin signings of Adam Ottavino and David Robertson. And I graded both of those as a B, just because both men had great years last year. I can't say enough about Ottavino's performance as the primary setup man to Edwin Diaz. It was a terrific year. It was really this great bounce back year for Ottavino, who was looking like he was maybe on his last legs. We don't really know exactly how much longer Ottavino really has in terms of his long-term addition, but again, he's only signed on a 2 year, $14.5 million deal, 2 years for Ottavino. But he did have a fantastic season last year. When you look at the numbers, 6-3. 2.06 ERA, 79 strikeouts in 65 2/3 innings. So it was one of his best seasons in some time. I'm going to say since his 2019 year with the Yankees, where he was slotting in a similar position with the Yankees as a setup man extraordinaire. So it had been kind of a rough go in 2020, 2021 with the Yankees and then the Red Sox. But the Mets kind of took a chance, wanted to see if it worked out. It did work out great for them. Ottavino cashes in a big way for the team, so his addition is going to look pretty good. I have to feel confident with him in the setup role. And then joining him will be David Robertson. And David Robertson, long career at this point. He's been around since 2008. Has seen plenty of time with a lot of teams at this point. New York, the Chicago White Sox, Philadelphia Phillies, Tampa Bay Rays. Started off the year with Chicago, not the White Sox, but the Cubs this time. And was having a great year as the closer for that Chicago Cubs team that was really going nowhere. The Philadelphia Phillies snatched him up at midseason, which was a good signing. He ended up being more of a setup man than closer along the way for them. But Robertson filled out nicely. It was a terrific all-around year for Robertson, even though, again, his walk rate has been kind of trending the wrong way these last few years. And with the Phillies, walked 16 batters in 23 in the third inning, so he has to work on that. But he remains a fantastic strikeout pitcher. One thing I will say about the Mets additions in the bullpen this year, all these guys can strike out now and throw good stuff. Great off-speed pitchers. Guys can also throw it in the mid-90s. So really nothing to go wrong with the Mets bullpen additions. I think that's probably they're coming into this season with one of their strongest bullpens in some years. I honestly couldn't think of a better off season they've done adding to the bullpen in some time. Maybe in 2006 when they had brought in Chad Bradford and Billy Wagner, and those were some excellent moves that they were putting in and that felt like a really good bullpen that year. This is feeling early on like it could be something similar. So we'll see how exactly that all plays out. There's a lot of pieces now they have with Ottavino, Raley, Robertson, and of course Edwin Diaz, who we'll go into in a minute. But they have what looks like a really impressive bullpen. Robertson, just a quality veteran and a guy who they're signing on a short-term deal, 1 year, $10 million. It feels like something that's not going to factor in particularly risky for them. The Mets were looking at Robertson at some point last year, so that they've definitely been scouting him for some time, and adding him as a great right-hand reliever option to the Mets bullpen, particularly in the late innings, as it all continues to set up for Edwin Diaz. Excuse me. Next up, I want to talk about Jose Quintana. And Jose Quintana signed on a 2-year, $26 million deal. I'm going to grade that as a B+. He was kind of lost in the mix, just because of all these like high-profile names that the Mets were signing up. But Quintana, what was his best year in years, and a great comeback performance for Quintana, exactly what he needed. It was one of, I think, his best seasons overall. I was looking at his numbers today. Finishes not a ton of decisions in this season, and it has to be said. Even though he started 32 games, he pitched only 165 innings, so he was not going deep. He was only going about 5 innings a start, and the result of this was he did not pick up a lot of decisions. So he finished the year with 6-7. Over the course of the season with both Pittsburgh and St. Louis. Now, Pittsburgh, he wasn't making a lot. He wasn't winning a lot during that time anyway. But when he came to St. Louis, it really kind of triggered this evolution in his performance. And St. Louis has just always done that sort of. But he would go the rest of the season with St. Louis, finished with a 2.01 ERA with them. In 62 and 2/3 innings, he struck out 48 batters, finished with a 2.60 FIP. Overall for the season, 2.93 ERA, or 2.99 FIP. Led the league in home runs allowed per 9 innings. He only allowed 8 home runs in 165 innings pitched. So this was one thing he does really well. It keeps the ball in the ballpark. His days as a 200-inning starter probably be done. And this is where the Mets' improved bullpen is going to come into major focus, because if this guy's only going about 5 or 6 innings, then you have to figure that the Mets are going to be leaning on their bullpen a little bit more in those starts. So it's important that they make as many additions and bring in as many quality relievers as possible. But Quintana, I can't go wrong with this move. He feels like a good 3-4 starter, and a guy who could comparatively be a number 2 or 3 starter. For most staffs, but in the case of the Mets staff, they don't really have to deal with him as a high-profile addition. So his addition, still a truly underrated move. I think it was something that no one was really seeing the Mets going to be involved in. But adding him on, it feels like a great positive. It's really just a matter of him staying healthy, and has been kind of tricky over the last couple of years with Quintana, but prior to any of these injuries, he was as consistent as they came, just in terms of the starter. He was kind of like the underrated American League starter during his youth with the Chicago White Sox. And then he just kind of ran into some problems with his arms and just staying healthy. But starting to look like this could be one of the quality moves for that Mets rotation. This next move was probably the most insane thing the Mets did all offseason. I'm going to count Carlos Correa in that. Like, there was nothing I saw that was anywhere near as insane as this one, as adding Correa. But this was pretty close. Adding Kodai Senga for a 5-year, $75 million deal, it was pretty wild. I don't really see them acquiring. I didn't see them being acquired by the Mets. It was something that people were throwing around and on the internet, but you didn't really expect the Mets to kind of jump in and throw a 5-year, $75 million deal at a guy who's never pitched in the major leagues before. But Senga comes with him a tremendous track record. He's a 6-time Japan Series champion, You know, take that where we will with a grain of salt, I'm sure, but this is a guy who's if he's a three starter, a number three starter for the staff, that's insane because he throws a terrific fastball. A guy can touch triple digits when he needs to get it up there. So this is a guy with a high 90s fastball. Now, a lot of people throw high 90s fastball. Not as many people throw a forkball. And this was his primary off-speed pitch during his time in Japan. It's going to be as impressive an off-speed pitch as we've seen in some time. And there's people who are going to get some flashbacks to the Dice K gyro ball, catastrophe, such as it was when he was in the major leagues. Senga comes with him a much more impressive track record. The Dice K's track record in Japan was pretty good, but Kodai Senga feels like a addition that the Mets needed to make. Again, this is comparatively low risk. I mean, it's 5 years, $75 million, so not nothing, but he is, at the very least, a guy who is going to shore up the back end of that rotation in a great way. And if he turns out to be a success, which it very well could be, he's going to look like a steal for them, a real wild card. We don't know exactly what it's going to be like. Japanese pitchers, it can kind of go either way. Really, just I think what factors in mostly is just their adaptation to a schedule that can be pretty demanding as opposed to when they were in Japan. Not that it isn't hard to pitch in Japan, but the schedule much harder. He's going to be pitching much more frequently, potentially twice a week in some cases. So it's something he has to get acclimated to. But if he can, and it might take him a season or two to get acclimated. In some cases, guys come over and are immediately really just have adapted perfectly to the major league rotation structure. But we'll see how Senga goes. I think it will be a great move for them. I grade it a B+ because there's really nothing. I don't see any way it doesn't really kind of work out for the Mets. Senga's got great stuff, and it's really just a matter of how he can adapt and if he can stay healthy. And if he does, then it's a great move. It's something that incredibly could be underrated, just in terms of the Mets offseason. So, next up we have Brandon Nimmo, and this was something that it felt like it was going to happen, but I'm glad that the Mets didn't kind of overthink it. They weren't jumping into the Judge sweepstakes or anything like that. Brandon Nimmo was pretty clearly they're one of the focuses of the team because he had such a great year last year and cashed in at a perfect time for his addition to this team. So we'll see exactly how it's all going to play out. I think it's going to play out really well. Nimmo coming in on a 8-year deal, $162 million. That's a lot to pay for a guy who just kind of had like his first full like quality year that he remained healthy in. But it's, I think, a great addition. Everybody loves Brandon Nimmo. He's obviously one of the best guys at getting on base in the league. He's quietly become a much more solid defensive player. He's playing some of the best center field the Mets have seen played since the days of Carlos Beltran, I'm going to say. And this is in quite some time. So Brandon Nimmo, I feel like it just keeps getting better for him. It was a lot of money to pay and a lot of years, but for him to stay in this league, he's stay with his team, and remain what is very likely a chance that he's going to become a Met for the remainder of his career. It feels good. It feels nice to keep a fan favorite and a local boy and a guy who they feel very happy with, Met fans and the Met front office and the clubhouse. It really can't go wrong, and Nimmo was clearly going to drive up a lot of interest from other teams. The Yankees were looking into him, as with the Giants. I believe the Rockies were also throwing their name to him early on. So there was a lot of interest. I'm glad he came back. This was, I think, the perfect place for him. He feels like a guy who's just on the cusp of kind of hitting his stride right now as a major league player. I predict probably one or two All-Star appearances in the next few years with Brandon Nimmo. There's a lot of room for improvement still, and it's something to say because Nimmo had a great year last year, finished with 5.1 WAR, and was really starting to look like the type of all-around star that like the Mets were anticipating that he might turn into when they first drafted him about 12 years ago. There's nothing I've seen from Nimmo that makes it seem like he's a bad bet. It's really just kind of a matter of his health. He hasn't really stayed very healthy the last few years, and that has kind of eaten into his value in terms of how many years then that's really felt like he's worth. But signing an 8-year deal, nothing to sneeze at. I think 8 years for a guy who's definitely going to hit his peak career-wise pretty soon, but to keep a local fan favorite in place, I think just really worth it for them to sign him up to that. So glad to see Brandon Nimmo still in a Met uniform. So next up, we have the Edwin Diaz signing. That was the Mets' first move really of the offseason. And Edwin Diaz, a spectacular season. There's really nothing that hasn't been said already about Diaz's performance, but I'll say certainly a lot. He became, once again, the most dominant closer in baseball after a 3-year stretch where he was looking considerably more average. It looked like maybe he couldn't really cut it in New York. He puts together one of the best seasons by a reliever, not just in Mets history, but maybe in Major League history overall. He finishes 9th in Cy Young voting, makes the All-Star team. Finishes the year with a 1.31 ERA and an absurd 118 strikeouts and just 62 innings pitched, only 32 saves, and that really just had to do with not a problem with saving games. He was saving far more than he had been in the past, but or not really saving as many games as he had been in the past if you figure in his time in the Mariners, but it matched his career high from the previous season. And this was, you saw a sort of switch being turned on with Diaz. He had suddenly kind of refocused and found what made him so good in that 2018 season with the Mariners before he came to New York, before the Mets traded for him. He put together this like extraordinary season that people were just like fawning over themselves about. They were like this. They thought he was the best reliever by far in baseball, and then he had like the 3-year stretch where he was just kind of muddling along. He was looking much more average. He of course had that horrific 2019 season where he single-handedly cost the team. Maybe not single-handedly. That seems a little harsh, but he made a pretty big mess of things during that 2019 season and definitely cost them huge games during the stretch and may have contributed very significantly to that 2019 team never making the postseason that year. Even though they were a very good team, but in 2022 puts it all together, and as I mentioned before, 118 strikeouts, also only 18 walks allowed. He had been flashing better control in 2021. He only walked 23 batters in roughly the same amount of innings as he did in 2022. So he was starting to flash a little bit more control, definitely as opposed to his time in 2019 and 2020, where he was kind of all over the place. And of course, the strikeout rate had dipped significantly down in 2021. Still was very good, but he wasn't really striking out at guys at the same clip, but that really rose back up and finishes this season up with what can only be described as just this otherworldly dominant performance that was going to earn him an enormous contract, make him one of the highest paid relievers in baseball, and it did, signing that monster deal, 5 years, $102 million. And this includes a $20 million option for the 2028 season. So he is going to be in Citi Field for the foreseeable future, and we can't wait to hear that his entrance during the season became this kind of cultural phenomenon where everybody was paying attention. Everybody across the league, people who were not even really baseball commentators, were standing up and taking focus and looking at him and seeing this guy who was just coming in and everybody going out of their minds, excited for him to just cave the side, strike guys out, look dominant doing it, and have a great year. And it's a fantastic signing. They had no better options. Let's say that it was Diaz or bust, and they needed to make sure that they got this deal done with Diaz. So I'm glad to see that they had gotten it done. It was their first significant move and the move that they needed to make very quickly. They did it. So we're very pleased to see Diaz is going to be the Mets closer for the foreseeable future, and should remain here for 5 more years. But hopefully, I would like to see him. I would like to see him finish his career as a Met. I've made that kind of decision in my mind. I was like, this guy really needs to stay as a Met, just because he's become this sort of larger than life figure at Citi Field, and people are really responding to him now. 4 years into the deal, into the acquisition of Diaz, they're finally kind of warming up to him at this point. But yeah, he had a terrific season that I can't wait for him to kind of keep that up. And let's see how he does in the following year. It's going to be a tough act to follow next year, but I have no doubt that he's going to deliver yet another very impressive season on the heels of his wonderful 2022. And that brings us to our final signing by the Mets in this offseason thus far, anyway. And that is the monster deal to acquire Justin Verlander. And bringing in Verlander to replace Jacob deGrom, necessary move. Was something that it felt like when Jacob deGrom had, opted out, ultimately signing elsewhere with the Texas Rangers. It kind of felt like a blow that Mets fans were not really mentally prepared for. It didn't feel real. And then when he was kind of appears in the Rangers uniform at the press conference, he's talking about a chance to win with them. It really felt like this just like giant kick down south, and really had everybody reeling. And it was you had to wonder at that point, what do they do? How do they bounce back from it? And the move had to be something considerable, and they did it, and they absolutely pulled it off by acquiring Justin Verlander on this 2-year, very short deal, but one that's going to pay him very handsomely. It's $86.6 million. His contract will include a $35 million vesting option for 2025, and this matches Max Scherzer's deal. Gives him the highest average annual value in Major League history. And so, spectacular contracts. Really nothing you can say about it. It's $43 million a year that they're paying him. So you have to feel like this is something that kind of has to work for them. The question of who's going to be acing the staff is going to be interesting because Verlander won the Cy Young Award last year, and a very well-deserved Cy Young Award won by Verlander. Yet another award in his hat. He has nothing really to do at this point other than win another World Series title, which is something he clearly has interest in doing it while wearing the blue and orange is now going to be his goal. So it's going to be an intriguing run for Verlander. This is the last stretch of his career, so you have to wonder how much left he has in the tank. Hopefully he does have enough to kind of help the Mets toward the quest for the World Series title. We certainly saw with Max Scherzer, he was having some trouble staying healthy. Verlander doesn't really come with any kind of question marks in terms of his long-term health. He's been very healthy for his entire career, minus the one major arm injury. But this is nothing really that you feel like, oh, he's not going to be able to stay on the mound. He's going to be out for most of the year. Definitely not none of the question marks that you were going to get with Jacob deGrom. So Verlander, while much older than Jacob deGrom, not much older, only a few years older, but he is definitely on that precipice of entering into this sort of advanced stage of his career, but has not displayed anything that makes it seem like he's going to immediately regress upon his arrival in New York. In fact, it seems like he's gotten better with age. Certainly things that has to do with his impeccable off-speed stuff. He still throws the ball hard at his age. just continues to this improbable sort of renaissance in his late years of his career that now the Mets are trying to benefit from, and hopefully Verlander can help them. He certainly helped the Astros this last season and into the postseason, and the expectation is once again that Verlander has to kind of pull everything that is still within him and kind of focus that and get that on the mound and get this team over the hump and finally into that World Series territory where it's gotta feel like it's World Series or bust at this point with all these major deals that they've just put in. There's the late night news that was released. This is for Monday evening. I'm recording, and they had speculated very late now that the Twins may be coming back into the picture for Carlos Correa, which kind of makes you feel like, what's going on? How is this possible that the Twins are somehow back in it? So you have to feel like them losing Correa after getting him in this kind of improbable fashion, if they lose him, it's going to feel not great. At the same time, though, as I've detailed out, they've done an extraordinary offseason. I mean, even if they don't sign Correa, this is still a spectacular performance in terms of the front office, really making it clear that they are trying to sign as many guys as possible. There's nothing really I can say about the Correa deal other than I want them to get it done. I don't feel like this is something that needs to fall apart. But if the Mets are really not satisfied with what they're looking at and Correa's camp is not interested in sort of amending the deal that they had agreed with the Mets with, it may fall apart. I certainly don't want that to happen. I doubt Mets fans want that to happen. It doesn't feel like something that should happen. In the event it does happen, they do have players in place, although it's going to feel like a big letdown when they have been the last couple of weeks. People have been expecting Carlos Correa to be in a Met uniform, so hopefully they can get this deal done. I still feel in some part that this is more of a tactic than anything from Correa's camp to kind of get the Mets to agree. I really don't think that Correa wants to play in Minnesota again, and agreeing to a 12-year deal or however long it's going to be. There's I believe it was $285 million for 10 years or 12 years. I have to check that, but it was a major deal, but it was going to be a lot less than what he was going to be getting with the Mets or the San Francisco Giants. So you have to wonder that if Correa really feels like playing in Minnesota is a good long-term option. I don't. For his brands, it seems like a much better place to be put in New York, and having that kind of major recognition on this major market team with Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso and Verlander and Scherzer, Diaz, Nimmo, Jeff McNeil, Starling Marte, all these huge names that are surrounding him. And if he goes back to Minnesota, nothing against Minnesota, it's nothing. It really sounds like I'm cutting on Minnesota right now. I'm not. I have a lot of respect for Minnesota, but this was a team that finished 78 and 84, and he was kind of the only guy in place on a team that doesn't really have what appears to be a future that looks like it's going somewhere. That's probably the nicest way to put it. They look kind of aimless. There's just a lot of guys who are just making camp on that season for the Twins that year. They do have Byron Buxton, but there's certainly a lot of questions with Byron Buxton still as well. So there's not really a great position right now for him to go back to Minnesota. Kind of with his tail between his legs. So I would assume that's not going to be the move. I certainly don't want it to be. I don't want to keep talking about Carlos Correa, but if he does decide to go back to the Minnesota Twins, I'm going to say it would be for his career a dramatic step down. It would be a horrible idea. And I do believe that Correa and Boris know that the best option for him is going to be with the Mets. That being said, there's apparently still a long way to go with this. Um, we'll see how it plays out. I certainly have made my hopes made in terms of what I want the Mets to be doing with Carlos Correa. But again, even if this doesn't pan out, I'm going to say that this is, based on everything I detailed out, a terrific off season that they've had. Even some of their under the radar moves, they look like they're going to be winners. I can't say really enough about their performance this offseason. It's, in my opinion, the best offseason in Mets history. And you can see that from the grades I was showing out. There's really nothing that doesn't work out for them in this case. Even Narvaez is probably like the biggest question mark in this case, and Narvaez still comes within like he's an all-star, all-star with terrific offensive and defensive abilities. I don't really see that one working out very badly for the Mets. It's just that they did end up paying a fair amount for a guy who's going to probably be the backup catcher. But let's not go down that road again. So those are my grades for the Mets offseason. I really hope any listeners have enjoyed this podcast. I think I've detailed out pretty well how I think the offseason went. And there may be still more to do. I will be releasing this starting on Tuesday. I've decided that's going to be the weekly release date. And that will be going forward what we're going to be doing. So we'll be releasing new episodes of the podcast every Tuesday. And then if there is any kind of breaking news, if it's something major, maybe Carlos Correa related, then I will make the adjustment and release something maybe on the fly during the week. Depends on, again, the nature of the news. If it's like a minor league signing, like they just pulled out for Tim LeCastro, I'm not gonna stop and record a whole episode just for Tim LeCastro. His mention just now is really the best he should be deserving at this point. But nothing against Tim LeCastro. But anything major news that will warrant its own emergency episode release out. So Tuesday will be the official release day schedule. I decided that should be a good scheduled date. So if you want to listen to this podcast, you can listen to it on Anchor, Spotify. I'm also releasing the episodes on YouTube. So pick your listening station however you want to listen to these episodes. Do go right ahead. I will be linking them all into my Twitter page. You can find my Twitter page. It is Mike's Mets Podcast, which you can locate on Twitter. If you are interested in checking that out, so please do so and give me a follow if you want. So take a look at that. You can find me at my at MikePie415. So all my links will be listed there as well. So please give me a follow and like, and any feedback that you want to leave, please do so on either my Twitter or the YouTube page, however you want to get in touch with me. And once again, I hope we are going to see Carlos Correa in a Met uniform. But if not, it's been one heck of an off season thus far. So I certainly hope everyone's having a good January week, and hope you have a wonderful night. Take care, everybody.